Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Scotland and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a good few different styles, and if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they are very solid all round. They're not afraid to experiment, and their interpretations of the different styles that I've tried have always been pretty damn solid. But probably my favourite beers from them would be their kind of more old school West Coast IPAs that they've done. Now, the beer that we're going to have a look at today is one that they've released several times before, but I just haven't come across it until now. It's a style that I very much enjoy. It's kind of my native beer style, I guess we could say as well, and it also has a twist to it that I'm very, very curious to try because it is something that I probably will enjoy quite a lot. So yeah, needless to say, I'm really curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good one. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then we are going to head to the Black Isle, which is a little bit to the north of Inverness, the Highland capital in the north of Scotland. We're going to go to the northern part of the Black Isle, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Cromarty Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Pibroch. It comes in at 7% ABV, and this one is a Scotch ale, or wee heavy as they're calling it on the can, but for me wee heavy is more the American term. But yeah, this one apparently has been brewed with a little bit of German beech smoked malt, which is of course used in the Rauch beers of Bamberg, Schlenkerla, Spezial, Weiler, to name but a few. So yeah, this should be interesting for me, my native beer style, with a hint of the beers that really got me into craft beer in the first place. So yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to enjoy this one because I know this brewery are pretty good, and it is a flavour profile that I really enjoy. I'm always into these big kind of brown sugary and smoky flavour profiles, of course. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we get on. The Pibroch 7% Scotch ale from Cromarty Brewing Company, just outside of Cromarty in the north of the Black Isle in the Scottish Highlands. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Cromarty Brewing Company before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, of course, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Scottish playlist along with a number of other things, and we will continue to add to that over the next little while. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a little bit about Cromarty Brewery then. So, Cromarty Brewing Company, as I've mentioned to you already, are based on the Black Isle, about 20 minutes to the north of Inverness, which is the Highland capital in Scotland, and historically the Black Isle was a malt producing region, and much of this was used in brewing locally or exported further afield. But this brewery of course takes their name from the nearby village, the Cromarty village. But the original Cromarty Brewery, because there was one historically, this was established by George and Alexander Ross back in 1790, and it's located next to a burn on the eastern extremity of Cromarty village at the corner of Miller Road and Burnside Place. And this was actually quite a large brewery considering the times, and it's thought that the port at Cromarty was also used to export beer in addition to the cereals that the Black Isle was renowned for. But this brewery hit financial difficulties in the 1820s when several whiskies distilleries were opening up on the Black Isle at the time, and the brewery ceased operations in the 1850s, unfortunately. But this new incarnation, if we can call it that, of Cromarty Brewing Company is a family-run business consisting of Craig, Chappie and Jenny Middleton. So Craig is a graduate of the brewing programme at Heriot-Watt University, and while he was studying in Edinburgh, he'd been well known to produce beer in his student halls. And after he completed his degree, he worked for periods in Odell's Brewery over in Colorado in the US, and also for the Cairngorm Brewery in Aviemore. in Scotland. But while working in these breweries, Craig decided that he wanted to put his own beer on the market. He applied for grants, he got some bank loans to finance the start-up, and he went for it. So Craig's dad, Chappie, is the brewery's engineer, and he's quite involved in the maintenance of the brewing equipment, which comes from Bavaria in Germany, and his mum, Jenny, largely deals with the admin side of the brewery. But work on the brewery building commenced in the spring of 2011, and this hectic year that they had culminated with the production of the first casks on the 19th of December 2011. And the brewery itself can be found on Cannon Street in Davidston to the south of Cromarty Village. But over the last few years they've continued to develop new recipes and release new beers and build up their fermentation capacity, and as of July 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, they've produced around 110 different kinds of beer, according to Untappd. As I said to you earlier, these guys are a very solid all-round brewery in my opinion. Whenever they try a new beer style, they always tend to do it pretty well. But yeah, for me, the old school kind of West Coast IPAs that these guys do tend to be very, very solid. Rogue Wave is a really still a really nice solid one for me. The Happy Chappy Pale Ale's great. And yeah, there's a few others there. I mean, Black Hop Down and Man Overboard if you want kind of more bold black IPAs and double IPAs and things like that. But yeah, this is a brewery that I would recommend that you check out. Actually, they started off with a hell of a lot of promise, but they have kind of turned into they sort of do a little bit more slow. In the early days, these guys were actually quite prolific in putting out lots of different beers, but these days they tend to be a little bit slower with their recipe development and things, and focus more on kind of perfecting the style and things like that. But their beers, as I say, very, very solid and definitely worth checking out in my mind. So yeah, if you want to learn more about these guys, because that's all I can really tell you about them, if you want to learn more, check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done thus far. So yeah, let's go on then and have a wee look at the beer itself. So I'll just let you have a wee look at the can on this one before we open it up. As you can see, the artwork on this one is a wee bit different. It's like a kind of shipwreck or something like that there in a dried out loch or something like that. It looks almost like the kind of plains of Canada or something like that. I'm not sure what this is actually meant to symbolise, but the ship is called PD Lass. But yeah, nice artwork I have to say. I do quite like this, but it's a 440ml can. Of course, I can't remember what I paid for this one. But yeah, I was just really curious to try this when I saw the Cromarty Brewing Scotch Ale. This is one that I've heard good things about and one that I've wanted to try for quite a wee while. When you actually hold the can of this one, you can feel the density of this beer. So yeah, this should be quite interesting. It is only 7% though, and as we said earlier, the name is Pibroch. And Pibroch, for those of you watching outside of Scotland, it's like an old kind of Gaelic sort of song, if you like, if I remember correctly. A Pibroch is an old music genre from Scotland, an old Gaelic thing. But yeah, 7% ABV this one, the Pibroch wee heavy with a little bit of German Rauch malt in it. So yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. I just have to say I'm really curious about this one, but I think you guys gathered that already. So let's do this. This should be very nice. So I think that will do for the moment. I think we've got about 80% of the beer out and into the glass, but that should do for the moment to have a little look at the colour and all this kind of stuff. So before the head disappears on this one, we can see that the beer has poured with about a 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of fawn coloured head. That is fading away very quickly though to be a sort of thin foamy layer over the top and a nice kind of thicker ring around the edge of the glass. You can see if I bring it up to the camera, the bubbles on this one are kind of medium in size, and it's a little bit foamier the further up of the head that you go. If we shine the light through this beer, it's like a lovely dark kind of it's like a darker chestnut colour you get out of this one, but you get more of a kind of mahogany colour around the edges as you shine the light through. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. You can also see some little bits of sediment particle just kind of floating around in this one. But yeah, not too much in the way of visible carbonation. But you can also see that this beer is actually kind of opaque and a little bit hazy. I don't know if this beer if it's maybe just been sitting in the fridge a little bit too long, or if it's been sitting on the shelf a little bit. But when it's a more malty thing like this, it's not going to matter all that much, I would say. But yeah, in terms of what you'd expect from a Scotch ale, it looks pretty much the part. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging you do, or any adjuncts you put in, will affect the colour of the beer as well. But yeah, you know, it just depends on the Scotch ale. There's a few things you can do to change the colour with these, of course, because they are more kind of brown beers. But to tell you a little bit about the Scotch ale, I think we've said everything we really need to about the appearance. The thing to remember about the Scotch ales is that these beers are it's kind of an umbrella of sub-styles, if you like. The term Scotch ale or wee heavy. For me, I think wee heavy was a term coined by the Americans, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But when it comes to Scotch ales, you have to think about the shilling scale. So shilling, for those of you watching abroad, was what was used before pence came in, before they decimalised the pound. But yeah, you had the 30 shilling, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 shilling, drawn with a little kind of slash and a line next to it. But essentially, with the Scotch ales, the higher the malt content of the beer, the more alcohol you had, and thus you had to pay more tax on it. So the 30 shillings were the lowest alcohol ones, whereas the 80s and 90s were the heaviest ones. You do get 160 shilling ones as well, which are, you know, the beasts. They're the kind of plus 10% plus Scotch ales, but most interpretations of the Scotch ale or wee heavy that you find from breweries these days tend to be kind of somewhere between the 80 and 90 shilling in my experience. So I'm curious to see what this one is going to be like, but there are quite a few interesting Scotch ales available from the modern craft breweries in Scotland these days. If you want something a bit more classic, then you go to Track Your House. If you want something a wee bit more modern, then the Old Parochial from Tempest Brewing Company is one that you can't really go wrong with, and also the Old Jock from oh, this is going right out of my head now. The Old Jock. Who did the Old Jock again? Yeah, the Old Jock beer anyway. Broughton Brewery, Broughton Ales, that's it. The Old Jock from Broughton is one that you really need to check out too. But yeah, this is the first time I'm trying this beer from Cromarty Brewing. But let's have a wee look at the aroma of this one before we actually taste the thing. I'm really curious about this because of the presence of these German Rauch malts. Oh, yeah. There's just something always sets off the. There is just something that always sets off my nostalgia factor with these things. Yeah. This is really interesting, this one, because it does remind me a lot of Schlenkerla, but it has a good little bit more of an oily, brown sugary thing than Schlenkerla. You have to remember that quite a few of the Schlenkerla beers are lagers. This is an ale, because you know the Märzen is a lager, the Urbock is a lager as well. I think the Fasten beer is also a lager. It's only really the Weizen that isn't. It's an ale. But yeah, this is like a slightly more sweet and brown sugary version of like Schlenkerla or Spezial or something. That's immediately what comes out of this beer for me. Yeah, but aroma-wise, it is really nice. You know, if you think about a Rauch malted Scotch ale, you would have something in your mind pretty similar to what you get in here. Lovely big bready notes, that big kind of meaty smokiness coming out of it. Good little bit of brown sugar, a little bit of hoppy character, and also just a little hint of red fruit as well. This is a lovely smelling beer, so I'm going to say straight away a thumbs up to Cromarty Brewing for this, a Rauch malted Scotch ale. This is good. It smells lovely. Let's just break that aroma down though and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth before we actually taste the thing. So, for me, the backbone of this beer, you absolutely have a lovely kind of you absolutely have a lovely little bit of that kind of wholemeal brown bready, bread crust as your backbone. There's a little touch of woodiness in there as well, little slight hint of nuttiness, but then above that you get a kind of rye bready type quality coming out of the aroma. Yeah, there's a wee bit of rye bready character in there, a sort of more wholemeal brown bready type character as well. And then, yeah, the way that that goes together, I would say, is really quite nice. Yeah, the wholemeal brown bready, the way that all the bready characters in this one come out is really quite interesting. But the smoky character is kind of like infused into the bread. And for me, you can talk about Scotch peated malt, which is kind of more grassy and earthy in my experience. But you can also talk about the German Rauch malts, which have this big kind of smoked, meaty type character to them, and also a little bit of woodiness. You can definitely smell the distinctive. Woodiness and meaty smokiness in this one. It's like the kind of Maillard or Milliard, I forget how you pronounce it, reactions that you get when you kind of sear a little bit of meat, that little bit of brown stuff that you get on the edge of the meat. That's absolutely what you get out of this thing. It's lovely. It really is very, very nice. Yeah, really, really good stuff, I have to say. So on top of the kind of bready characters that you get out of this beer, you do get a little bit of brown sugar for sure. For me, the brown sugary characters that are coming out of this one, they have a little bit of leatheriness to them, which can in some cases indicate a longer wort boil. But yeah, there's a little bit of a leathery kind of brown sugary character to this one. You do have a wee bit of yeah, within that you've got a little bit of a toasty brown sugar as well. There maybe is a wee bit of a sweet caramel in the middle of the nose, and maybe a teeny little hint of biscuit, but that's quite minimal. The Rauch malty character that you get in this one is pretty strong actually, and it does kind of dominate the aroma a little bit, but I think we'll get a lot more complexity out of this beer when we actually taste it. The aroma, as I say, the aroma is quite smoky dominant, but you get a little bit of nuttiness and woodiness and stuff out of this one the further into the nose that you go. But yeah, I like this. I do like how this pieces together actually. In terms of the hoppy side of things, I think it's kind of what you'd expect from the style, to be honest with you. If I was guessing, it's either going to use one of the American hops, knowing Cromarty, because they do like their New World hops, or it could be using like Bramling's Cross or a Northern Brewer, actually. I think that's kind of that, because the green component in this one, it does actually smell a little bit more American in that sense, so I'm not 100% sure about what hop they would use here. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, you get a little touch of earthiness out of it. There's a little bit of herbal character in there as well, and I was getting little bits of kind of floral aromaticity and kind of grassiness out of the beer. But yeah, the aroma that comes out of this one for me, on the hoppy side of things, it's quite smooth actually. I do like how that pieces together. Interesting stuff, I do have to say that. It is really interesting stuff, this one. Yeah, I like that. So in terms of I think that's everything we need to say about the green component, to be honest with you. The fruity side's a little bit hard to pick up in this one actually, because that's the last thing we should look at. You do get a little touch of, there's a wee bit of like a red fruity sort of thing, like a kind of plummy, pruny sort of note, and a wee bit of kind of blackcurrant and stuff. But honestly, in the aroma, it's really quite hard to pick up. You do get a little bit of sharpness in the top of the nose when you go when you take it in really deeply. But other than that, it's a bit hard to pick up those fruity notes. But a little bit, yeah, a bit of the raisin, a little bit of plum, and a wee bit of prune and stuff like that. So there are a few fruity things going on. But as I always say, take a wee bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. This one really has kind of just piqued my interest because, like I say, my native beer style, which I really do enjoy, and then German Rauch malt, which kind of symbolises the Rauch beers that got me into beer in the first place, which was a really random way, on reflection, of getting into craft beer. But let's taste this one and see what it's all about. This is the Pibroch, a 7% wee heavy Scotch ale, whatever you want to call it, from Cromarty Brewing Company on the northern part of the Black Isle in the Scottish Highlands. Let's do this. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, I have to say, that is pretty damn nice. Wouldn't expect anything less from Cromarty Brewing Company though. As I've said, these guys, when they started off, they were like really kind of adventurous and really bold in what they were doing, but over the years they've kind of slowed their recipe development down and become a little bit more kind of perfectionist, I would say. But they've pulled this beer off really nicely, and this kind of shows how that their approach that they have now works. It really is kind of finds the middle ground between, you know, like Schlenkerla and an old school. You know, it really, for me, this finds the good kind of middle ground between like the old Jock from Broughton and the Schlenkerla Märzen or Fasten beer. It's really very much like that. It's kind of, it really sits in that middle ground. It's like if you blended the two, to be honest with you. So I'm just going to say straight away. I will say though, if you're not into kind of smoky flavour profiles, this beer might not be for you, but I am, so I like it straight away. So let's do as we always do. We'll break the beer down, we'll explain the flavours a little bit more in depth, describe them I should say, and we'll talk about that. Let's do it. It's really nice. Yeah, so the middle third of your palate then with this beer, we use that as the starting point. The backbone of the beer has a lovely, smooth, like, it's a mix of, you get like a dry kind of woody character to it. You can almost get the beech wood from the malt in there, which is kind of interesting. But then you also have this kind of nice, like pumpernickel, rye bready type bread crust. I'd say the bread crust kind of forms the backbone of the beer, and further forward on that middle third of your palate, you're starting to get the kind of drier woody notes coming out of the beer too. So yeah. So for me, the brown bready notes and the woodiness kind of just linger there. They sort of just linger there until the aftertaste. It's interesting. I think I'd be curious to know if the rest of the malts in this one are like English or Scottish, because it doesn't, other than the Rauch malt, it doesn't feel particularly German in that sense, which is, for me, is, as I say, is quite interesting. You know, over the years I've developed a taste. I can tell when it's American malt, I can tell when it's German malt, and I can usually tell when it's Scottish or English malt. I'm pretty sure the majority of the malt in this beer is either Scottish or English, to be honest with you, just because of the way the bready character is. But like we said, bread crusty base, a little bit of a woody character further up, further forward on that middle third of your palate. Then above the bread crust, you do get quite a nice fluffy layer of like wholemeal brown bread, and it feels like the smoky characteristics are kind of infused inside that. And like I say, the smoky character that you're going to get from this German Rauch malt, it's got a little bit of meaty character to it. Yeah, it's got a little bit of meaty character to it. It's got a little bit of it's got a little bit of meaty character to it. It's got a little bit of kind of woodiness to it, and yeah, it's got a little bit of like nuttiness as well, which is kind of interesting. So all of these flavours kind of feel as if they're infused into that kind of brown rye bready character. So, it's not rye bread. I think it's more pumpernickel. I think, yeah, maybe describing it as wholemeal brown bread isn't quite right. It feels a little bit more like a pumpernickel there, but a lot of the complexity you have in that middle third of your palate is focused within the bread. But above the bread, you start to get the kind of brown sugary characteristics out of the beer. So let's focus on that. So yeah. For me, the brown sugary characteristics are quite interesting, and of course the Scotch ale as a style is more kind of brown sugary and things. I mean, if you think about the American take on this style, the American take on the style is very kind of oily and very sort of sweet for me, and the fruits tend to be a little bit more red. The Scottish brewed Scotch ales tend to be a bit drier and a bit more kind of toasty, and the fruits are a little bit drier. That's the main difference for me. But the brown sugars you get out of this one are very in keeping with the Scottish take on the Scotch ale. So you have this kind of layer of sort of leathery brown sugar on the top, or on the base, sorry. Get that more leathery brown sugar in there. I'd be curious to know the wort boil time of this beer, because it feels as if it has that little bit of leathery character to it. On top of that, you get a little bit more, you have a little circle in the middle of your palate where you do get like a kind of sweet caramel note out of the beer. The leathery brown sugars are underneath it, but maybe in the middle you have a very slight kind of toasty brown sugary character as well. So yeah, if we're talking about Scotch ales generally, this is probably one of the kind of drier Scotch ales that you're going to come across in my mind, but the smokiness really pushes it that way, so makes sense. But yeah, you can feel the brown sugar layers, the leathery character on the bottom, a little bit of toastiness above. Then you've got a mix of you've got a kind of sweeter caramel just sitting on top of that. But you do have little hints of like a biscuity type character as well, which is quite interesting. So yeah, I think that covers the middle third of your palate, and that's where the majority of the complexity in this beer actually lies, to be honest with you. I like how the German side of things, it's kind of the smoky side of things is like infused into the bready side of the beer, so that works really nicely too. Yeah, so back third of your palate then, the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of a bready build up in there, so a nice kind of home, like sort of rye bready character in the base, like pumpernickel, and it gets a little bit more wholemeal bready above that. And as I've often said, the back third of your palate is going to give you very similar flavours to the middle third of your palate, but generally speaking, they'll come out in different intensities. And you also have sweeter flavours further forward on the palate, more kind of dry and bitter flavours further back. So on that back third of your palate, you can feel the bread crusty base is even drier. You've got the woodiness above that, which is that you get is lingering there too. For me, it's almost a little touch crackery actually, but that feels drier. You've got a kind of almost rye bready type. No, it's not quite dry enough and grainy enough to be rye bread. You've got a kind of German pumpernickel bread layer there, which feels a little bit lighter and more airy than it does on the middle third of your palate. Then you've got a distinctly wholemeal brown bready layer above that, which you didn't have so much in the middle third of your palate, and that feels quite light and airy as well. Then above that you can feel some of the kind of leathery brown sugars just creeping over and giving you a bit of dryness on the top of that back third of your palate. And then above everything else you have the more yeasty side of the beer just pushing its way out. So yeah, the kind of yeasty side of this beer is quite nice. You can feel it's like this dense ball of wholemeal, like sweet wholemeal brown bread. So I really do like how that pieces together. So that big yeasty wholemeal kind of brown bready character, and the yeast is interesting. It's kind of got a little bit more woody character to it, a little bit of cracker and stuff, and it's just wrapped in wholemeal, but you do get some of the smoky notes kind of coming around that. So it's like a smoky wholemeal bready character, and that sits above everything else on that back third of the palate. So yeah, the smokiness is coming out in two places in this beer, the middle third of your palate with the bread, and the yeasty side of things too. So yeah, the back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is taller, and as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together really nicely. So from the malt base in this one, I would say that this beer, it's most definitely kind of in the 80-90 shilling range, to be honest with you. It's really pushing the top end of the shilling scale, notwithstanding the 160 shillings, which are just monsters, to be honest with you. Love them, I do love them. But yeah, this beer for me, the malty side of things really finds a nice ground between, like I say, the Schlenkerla Rauch beer and on one hand, and you've also got like the Old Jock Broughton Scotch ale in there as well, which is really nice. It really is. This beer is kind of like a combination of these two, to be honest with you. That's probably the best descriptor I can give you of the malt base, just for comparison. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, you get a little bit of herbal character. You can feel some of the dry smokiness creeping out there toward the edges of your palate too. But as you reach the kind of front corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of floral aromaticity in there, and then round the front curve of the tongue, it's just a little bit lighter and more grassy as well. So yeah. So yeah, for me, the green component is quite wet actually, which is interesting. As I say, I'd be very curious to know what hop is being used in this one. It could be a combination of like Bramling's Cross and maybe Northern Brewer from Germany or something like that. But yeah, I'm just thinking the fruitiness doesn't even really give it away, but the green component feels like a mix of American and German, or American and English. But the more that I drink of it, I believe less that there's American hops in there. That's one of the things. As I say, I'd be very curious to know the hops. It doesn't say, actually. Oh wait, no it does, I'm telling you lies. The hop on this one is Fuggles. Now that's interesting, because Fuggles is a hop that I don't actually like that much, but it works well in this beer. Usually it gives you that ashy kind of character. So yeah, the Fuggles in this hop, in this beer, works quite well. It gives you that ashy kind of character. I was thinking it was more just kind of earthy and herbal, but yeah, power of suggestion, as I say. But yeah, let's look at the front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of this beer. And now that I know there's Fuggles in there, it kind of makes sense that the fruity character isn't so prominent, because Fuggles is not the most fruity of hops, can we say. So yeah, border region then between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build up in there again. You can feel the sort of pumpernickel bread in the base, and the kind of wholemeal bread on top of that. And the base of that front third of your palate is a little bit more of yeah, you do get a nice little bit of kind of smooth woody character in there. In the base you get a little bit of the kind of wholemeal brown bread, and you get a little bit of the kind of rye bready character in the wholemeal brown bread, and then above that you get that nice little bit of that nice oily bubble where the fruity, juicy esters roll their way out of the beer. But the smokiness for me kind of builds up and kind of stops at that border region between middle and front third of your palate, which is really interesting. So, the fruity side of the beer then is quite interesting. At the back of that front third of your palate, you absolutely get a little bit of like a datey sort of thing. There's sultana, dry white green grapes, and as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, you've got this big oily pear sort of thing coming out of this one, which I really do quite enjoy. And as you move into the kind of front half of that front third of your tongue, you do get a little hint of red fruit out of this one. There's a little bit of blackcurrant in there. I don't know if I'd go as far as saying fig or something, but I think, yeah, there is a bit of juicy blackcurrant on that front half of the front third of your palate. But yeah, the back half of the front third of your palate's like date, sultana, oily pear. It works really, really nicely. I'm just surprised that the Fuggles can give you so much fruitiness. It's a hop, I think, that works I always considered Fuggles a hop that worked very well with like porters and stouts and things like that, when you wanted a more roasty kind of bitter sort of thing. I never really thought about its use in Scotch ales, but this one works, especially when you've got the Rauch malt in there. So thumbs up again to Cromarty for doing something a wee bit different. I think this is a really nice beer. As I say, it is very much a combination of Schlenkerla Rauchbier Märzen, and Broughton Ales Old Jock. It's very much something like a blend of these two beers. That's really what it tastes like. So yeah, let's round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel then. For me, this beer, it's very much, it's kind of mid-bodied, pushing toward the top end of mid-bodied. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It feels very clean, which is kind of typical of the water in the Black Isle. Very, very good quality water, of course. So it has a little bit of that cleanliness to it, but overall the beer has a bit of dryness, but also a little bit of a kind of slickness as well. Yeah, the way that all goes together, I think, is really very, very nice. On the hoppy side of things, this beer, it's not overly bitter. It has quite a bit of dryness to it, so you have this whole debate about perceived bitterness and calculated bitterness, but this is somewhere between, it's got to be about, I think it's about 20-ish or 25 IBUs, something like that. It has, as I say, it has quite a bit of dryness that could make you feel that the bitterness is a little bit more. But yeah, it has a nice little bit of dryness there. The malty base on this one is, it gets drier and drier the further into the aftertaste that you go, and even the sweetness in this beer is quite dry. The smokiness, the sweetness, everything about this beer is quite dry the further into the aftertaste you go, which I do like. The hoppy side of things we've already covered. The fruity side of this beer is quite interesting because it has really showed me what Fugos can do. So a little bit of dry, fruity character, and also just a little touch of red fruitiness. But this has been a really interesting beer to review, one that I've wanted to try for quite a wee while. I've heard good things about this one, and I'm sure they've done this brew like 2 or 3 times. But yeah, definitely cool to finally feature this one on the channel, and it's always nice to try something new from Cromarty because you know you're going to get a solid beer from them. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that from this one. A really interesting middle point between the sort of 80-90 Scotch ale on one side, very akin to Old Jock from Broughton Ales, and the Schlenkerla Rauchbier Märzen on the other side of things. It's very much like a combination of these two. I've really enjoyed this. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Cromarty Brewing Company as well. And we will see about returning to these guys again at some point very soon. But yeah, this was the Pibroch, a 7% Scotch ale with German Rauchmalt in it from Cromarty Brewing Company, just outside of Cromarty on the Black Isle, to the north of Inverness in the Scottish Highlands. Till the next time, Slange it, Skål, cheers, check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll see you guys in another review. Ciao just now.